one of the things we want to address with you, Samantha, is the concept, and we've kicked this around a couple times with your predecessors with host compliance. I know you're not host compliance anymore, but the concept was the county would engage a contract with um, host compliance, but at the same time, um, it would be a contract where the towns could piggyback in on that contract. Okay,
Yeah. Hmm.
so let's different towns contract with you. They would contract with you through the county's contract. Okay,
Yeah.
and that's what we're trying to establish here. All right, to get some sort of basis how that would work, and it should somehow be a price reduction, I guess, instead of doing individual. The only thing that the county will not get involved with would be compliance. That would be on each town's own issue of how to comply with the zoning and so forth on that. All right. But anyway,
Absolutely.
all right. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, or can be done, or have you done that with other counties in the state or any other state of New York?
Yeah, actually, it is very specific in New York that quite a lot of the counties do look to have sort of a data share agreement between the county as well as their constituent towns and cities. So we're working on quite a few of those at the moment. So it is relatively specific to New York State that we do see that sort of data share agreement. So what we would generally do is we would contract with you guys at the county level. One of the things that I would want to know, obviously, is looking at what kind of contract you guys want. Because generally, what we would do is the address identification would be the bit that you would look at sharing in terms of the data sharing component, and then obviously because you're looking at different zoning and ordinance regulations for each one of the towns and cities, then that would sort of be where you'd split out and look at having specifics around each one of the different towns and cities within Columbia County, if that makes sense. So that would sort of be the distinction between the two. And then basically we would look at some different, like different contracts underneath that same umbrella of Columbia County with each one of the constituent parts of the county. So whether it be the towns and cities that are affected and that want to go ahead and contract.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So in terms of sort of where you guys are at the moment, I know that we'd kind of gone back and forth in terms of the implementation of your tax and basically looking at collection. Has there been any further discussion about the collection of your TOT tax and where you guys are in that sort of discussion at the moment?
Well, it got put on the back burner with the COVID, obviously,
Yeah.
for that. And we know the whole timing process in order to set up a tax for this would take almost a year to year and a half. So we didn't have even budget anything for any revenue for the year 2021 budget with that assumption I was going forward. But we'd certainly like to get it ready for 2022 budget to get something on the books and something passed by state legislators, our state legislators, everything to set up that taxing authority to start an occupancy tax. Is that
I
right, Matt?
suppose.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Were you saying me or I
Yeah,
think you
yeah,
said somebody
I
else?
think that's where we are, Matt.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. So the one question I would ask is just looking at whether or not you guys already do charge the tax through to hotels and motels. Because what we've generally tended to find is that if you're already charging that amount to hotels and motels, then it would sort of, within the guise of the regulations, be able to be extended to short-term rentals.
Yeah. We don't do that, Samantha. The city Hudson has something
Yeah.
similar to that in place right now, um, separate from the county.
Okay. So you're not charging it at least even to hotels and motels at the moment
No,
as
no,
well.
we're not.
Okay. Okay, because that's basically the rate limiting step is looking at actually introducing it across the county altogether. And generally, what we've seen is that the tax is already in play when you're looking at hotels and motels in terms of the TOT tax extending it. And so it does very much shorten the time that it takes in order to get the tax up and running. I will say we just had I would say that Q3 in terms of tax revenue has been the strongest quarter that they've seen to date. And so we know that a lot of different cities, towns, and county tax revenue through like that TOT tax. It's kind of seen as being sort of low hanging fruit because it's money that you guys should already be capturing, and obviously you can capture it relatively quickly. So whether it does take a full year or if it does take a bit less time, because most of the counties that I've spoken to in New York State are already capturing it, and what we can do to sort of expedite that process is definitely something we can look at.
Okay.
So I suppose in terms of where we are at the moment, I see some new faces, and obviously, I know that you had had a chance to speak to Paul before, and so just looking at what's the best use of the time and how to sort of move the conversation forward. So what I could do is share the presentation with you guys, so that way you have a chance to understand what we can do, how that would split out between the counties as well as the cities and towns, and then look at next steps. Obviously, for you guys to look at your TOT tax, and how that would be implemented. Other than the city of Hudson, I know that you guys sort of said that they sort of sit outside of sort of the data share agreement that you're planning to do. Is that still the case, or has that changed as well?
I believe it is, but Michael, would you agree with that?
I think that's likely, but I guess there's a chance that Hudson would want to use that same data for the enforcement of its own tax.
Okay.
So I think it depends on the numbers. If it drastically increases the cost for the county to include Hudson, it would make sense to not include Hudson. But if it's sort of the same opt-in contract, then I would probably give Hudson the option to do so.
And I suppose that's the thing, because I can see the city of Hudson, they've just done their regulations last week. They'd signed it into an ordinance. And so just whether or not there is the conversation at the moment about data sharing, and because obviously the main thing is just looking at synergies and making sure that you're getting the best data, but as well at the most cost effective rate across the whole county. And so stripping them out, we can obviously strip them out in terms of the cost to you guys, but making sure that they're actually getting that benefit, because yeah, we know that they're already regulating, and they're one of the bigger cities within Columbia County.
Okay.
Okay. So really just over to you as to whether or not it would be useful for me to share the presentation again, take you through, and obviously an update as well, because it's been quite a while since we last met, about what Granicus has been doing, Granicus host compliance, and then how we go forward from there. Does that sound good?
How does the committee feel about it? I mean, I see heads nodding, so I would say granted.
Okay.
I'd revisit the presentation.
Okay. I won't take you through the full amount, but do stop me if there's any bits that you feel that you already know. I think one of the things that obviously is the biggest driver and the biggest change in the market is obviously the fact that we're now a part of Granicus. And just looking at over the year, what that really means to you is that you have like a larger backing of a bigger company. And because it is a bigger company, we do have a lot more specialists, a lot more product team. So it is just more, I won't say sexy, but it has more to it than you would have known with host compliance. And obviously host compliance was already the leader in the market, but you're still getting more bang for your buck now. So I'm going to try and present, see how this goes. Okay. You can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So as I said before, what I do want to take you through is looking at host compliance solutions and cost-effective solutions to Columbia County short-term rental registration, compliance monitoring, fraud, audit, and enforcement challenges. So as I said before, I know that you've had a chance to and the rest of the team over the years, but really just to get you up to date on where we are as a company and how that really impacts Columbia County and what we can do for you guys moving forward. So first, I'll take you through introductions and looking at where we are as a company at Granicus, and then we'll look at Columbia County and the market context. So give you a bit more analysis around Columbia County and what we found in our analysis in December of 2020. The next bit we'll go into is the Granicus host compliance solution and how we can sort of help. And then if it's appropriate, we'll look at discussion and next steps. There's quite a lot of people on the call. Usually I ask at this point if there's one specific thing that you really want to get from a call and really want to understand moving forward, what would that be? To the group again, just to really understand, what is it that you'd want to hone in on for this meeting and feel like you really got a use out of the hour once we finish. Anybody?
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 Well, if you have contributing municipalities within the county, but some of them don't even recognize the use, how do you proceed with that? I mean, do you need to get the entire county, every municipality up to having their own ordinance before establishing a transient tax across the board? Or is it something that, is voluntary from the actual? Do you understand what I'm saying? Is it?
No, sorry. If you can just repeat the question, it was dim at the beginning, so I didn't get the first bit of the question.
If there are municipalities within the county that don't regulate or even recognize STRs in their zoning ordinance, and so you just parse them out until they're identified and begin data collection? Or, I know you've already probably done data collection county-wide, but how do you integrate, uses within a municipality that aren't, let's say, even recognized as being legal?
So there's two bits to that. If you're looking at tax, that's sort of separate from the ordinance and structuring your ordinance. So what we've seen across New York is that the tax is actually driven at the county level. And so irrespective of whether or not a specific city or town has any sort of ordinance in place regarding short-term rentals, you would still actually be able to drive through and capture the TOT tax. So those two are sort of very much seen as being separate. I wouldn't sort of conflate the two. And then once you actually have specific cities and towns that have an ordinance in place, that's when we would look at actually enforcing their ordinance. So the two are very much separate. But in terms of the data share, what we generally see is the address identification be the bit that's in the data share, because all of the other modules that we would tack on other than that would very much be geared towards either on your end, tax collection. If it was looking at the unincorporated areas as well, then you might be looking at, enforcement as well. And then for the different constituent towns and cities towards, enforcing their actual ordinance. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I have a related question to what Vanell was asking, and that is for towns that are requiring that short-term rental owners register with the town, we're going to get some compliance, and some people will do that, but then there are going to be others who don't. Are you going to be able to give us a list of everybody in our town who is offering short-term rental? We can compare those who have registered and those who have not, so we talk to them.
Absolutely. That's the whole crux of the program is to be able to drive compliance and make sure that those people who aren't registered become registered and become compliant with your regulations. So absolutely, that would be what our main driving factor would be. After this, I don't think I actually had a chance to send through some of the case studies that we have for some of the smaller, some of the smaller towns that we actually work with, but I will send those through, and it really gives you a really granular idea of how we're actually driving through to make sure that people become compliant with your regulations.
Well, that's good. Thank you very much. And I'm thinking just in terms of timing, while the tax collection may not start till 2022, I think it's going to be very important for the towns that are starting to require registration and inspections to get this information as quickly as possible in 2021. So
Yeah.
Ron, I don't know how you can sort of help move that along, but if the towns that want this data have to pay for it since the county has no budget, I think we should probably talk about that as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that, we do work with you on, because obviously we're coming to the end of the year as well. I've been speaking to quite a lot of my customers about some of the other options that we have available in terms of looking at delayed billing, and looking at the different structures that are there. Yeah, so it's definitely something that we can look at moving quite quickly. The implementation period can be anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks as well to get everybody up and running. So the earlier we can have those conversations, the better it is.
Art, that wouldn't be a problem.
Perfect. Okie doke.
Sounds
So,
good.
so go ahead.
I was just saying thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
I do have one other question.
Yep.
Are you able to distinguish between short-term renters and long-term renters who are using typically short-term platforms to advertise?
Yeah, so you can see on the different platforms whether or not it's less than 30 days or greater than 30 days, and usually that's the distinction between a short-term renter versus a long-term renter. So we are seeing more use of the short-term rental platforms for what I would term as being more medium-term rental, so over the 30 days. But you can see the distinction between the two, yes.
And can you distinguish between those that are offering that and those where that offer has actually been taken advantage of by consumers? So
So,
so
go
if
ahead.
somebody has a shorter term that's offered, but it has only been rented for more than 30 days, even though they offer less than that, are you able to distinguish and see exactly how long the individual periods of rent or use or reservation are?
So that comes down to what we have as the rental activity monitoring service. And basically, my old boss used to joke that, they used to ask Airbnb for the data, but they said, so we came up with the rental activity monitoring. The platforms themselves are closed, so we can't say for sure that somebody has rented their property out for less than 30 days, more than 30 days, like actually acted on it. We will know whether or not they're promoting their property as being less than 30. So what we actually have is like a model. So we can see the number of confirmed stays. I'll take you through the rental activity monitoring in more detail and more depth. But we can see the confirmed stays on the site for sure. And then basically what we want to do is model and understand, once we actually look at specifics around each one of the properties, what's the likelihood that they 30 days, less than 30 days, and understand that activity dynamic. And then what we do is we actually capture those people who are probably the biggest offenders, the ones who are most active and most likely have done, a lot of short-term renting. And then basically what they do is they can actually upload their actual data, which is available on all of the platforms for tax purposes. And so that's the sense check. And that's when you'll actually be able to see the full detail of all of the dates that they've actually rented out their property.
Okay.
Perfect. Okie doke. So a little snapshot of where we are today. So Granicus Host Compliance actually has over 4,500 government agencies. And basically the main push is looking at how to modernize their online services, web presence, and communication strategies. So there's kind of three main tenets to Granicus. First, looking at improving the customer experience, simplifying and automating workflows, enabling strategic community development. So, as you guys are aware, last year, Granicus purchased Host Compliance, and the main driving factor is Granicus Host Compliance is still very much all day, every day focused on just short-term rental related challenges. So we're the only company out there that is just focused on short-term rental related challenges. There's basically still three tenets to our rental. So there's the compliance and monitoring software. And then basically what we're doing is we're pulling down the data from the top 60 plus short-term rental platforms. And then we combine that with your assessor data. So that gives you a good amount of information in order to drive the other services that we have to offer. consulting and advisory services. So the one thing that I will say that's great for all the towns and cities that are going through the process of creating their ordinance is that we actually do have a free draft review. And so all of the different cities and towns will have the ability to use the free draft review and ensure that the regulations that they're putting in place are still the best practice. So overall, there's actually five sort of more Granicus. First, we have GovAccess, which is looking at transactional websites for today's citizens. GovService, so looking at online citizen self-service solutions. So the host compliance solution actually falls under GovService. GovMeetings, so you're looking at meetings, agendas, videos, and boards management. So again, in an online environment. GovDelivery has actually become really, really popular over the time of the COVID shutdowns because it's the only network that allows you to grow your user base. So it's targeted email, text, and social media communications, and GovRecords, which looks at paperless records management. Okay. So as I was highlighting before, we do work with quite a slew across New York. So you'll see some of the smaller places like Fallsburg, New York, Jewett, New York, but then some of the other counties that we do work with, Dutchess County, that's there, Ulster County, Franklin County, New York as well. So we do have a good slew of different cities and towns that we work with in counties across New York already. Okay. So I know in the past, the one thing that you guys have been grappling with is looking at permanent tax compliance to increase tax revenue. And as I've been seeing before, with mainly looking at this at Hudson, is just some of the issues that they've been facing over the last little while. And as we said before, I know that they have created their ordinance quite recently. The one thing that I would say that we have seen quite regularly since the COVID shutdowns have happened is that there is very much a trend for people to and come to the countryside. And so, what we are sort of anticipating and very much seeing is that places like Columbia County are experiencing an increase in volume of travelers at the moment, despite shutdowns and despite bans on travel. So with that, I will ask one more question before we sort of delve into Columbia County. Just looking at the people that are on the call at the moment and who's here, has there been any sort of change in terms of how contentious this issue has become within Columbia County, and has it sort of elevated the problem because of the changes that have happened over the last 6-9 months?
I guess if I could jump in, I think that for the county, we're really looking at increasing a tax, but avoiding sort of some of the regulation questions and sort of deferring that to the towns.
Yeah.
So I think individual towns have had really divergent conversations around this. So some towns I think have had a lot of conflict about whether or how short-term rentals should be done. And certain towns, I think it's very quiet. And I think somewhat related to that is, the county, it's not really our place. We don't really have the legal right to zone, but I think also we're happy to avoid some of those conflicts and just focus on the tax. So that, I'm not sure if that's really answering your question, but it's kind of a way of avoiding it.
Yeah, no, it does.
It's pretty much up to the individual towns how they monitor the short-term rentals in their towns. County wouldn't really know.
Yeah.
I think we do know that City of Hudson, a lot of the short-term rentals have turned into a long-term rental situation. That's not correct, Mike. So that's
correct up here,
yeah.
Chatham.
Because of COVID, Sam, that short-term rentals, that people are just staying up in Columbia County a little bit longer than they would normally do on a true vacation type of rental.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that it sort of splits out in terms of the analysis that we do, is that you will have some people who sort of either move into their properties for a longer period of time, again, to escape the city there's still quite a big proportion who are coming for shorter periods of time to places like Columbia County or Hudson, just so that they can get away from the everyday and still have a sort of vacation. So there will be a mix, and that's why I was saying before, looking at the rental activity monitoring and be able to drive through. So you do very much see both of those instances.
And I think hand in turn is also the real estate market because of COVID. It's pretty hot in Columbia County right now for that particular
Yeah.
reason. People are chased out of the city or coming from the city, and there's been a propensity lately of buying properties up here in Columbia
Yeah.
for uh, not only long term but permanent for that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we see it across the country. So it's not something that's just hitting Columbia County, but we have seen it across the country. Over the two short-term rentals, and what we actually saw was 202% growth in the short-term rental market. So there has been a huge increase, and the vast majority of the information and some sort of the travel patterns that we saw, sorry, were to the rural, sorry, out of the city communities, suburban and rural communities. Okay, so what I'm going to take you on to now is looking at context itself. So I know that again, you guys have gone over this quite a few times. This is basically a snapshot we did back in October. And what we actually found is that across Columbia County, we've identified 1,166 listings, which represents 1,002 unique rental units. So the difference between the rental units number and the listings number, the rental units are the physical properties themselves. Each one of those physical properties has the ability to list on more than one site, and that's the reason why the listings number is higher. So other component we see is just looking at median nightly rental rate. So very high or relatively high at $215 per night. And then
Do these numbers include the city?
so what we did is this, as you saw before, I believe it does include Columbia County. Sorry, not Columbia County. It includes the city of Hudson,
Yeah.
because generally what we would do is either unincorporated or incorporated areas, but it's just the city of Hudson that we would have to strip out. If I'm not mistaken, the city of Hudson has about 300 short-term rentals. So yeah, you'd still be looking at around the 700 mark for unique rental units. But I can go back and confirm as well.
All right. Thanks, Ann.
Mhm. So other bits to keep in mind is looking at the difference between single family homes as well as multifamily homes. So vast majority are single family homes that are being rented out. Vast majority are entire homes that are being rented out. So again, just looking at, you know, the TOT tax, you're looking at a substantial amount of revenue that would be generated by implementing that 5% tax. And so it's really something to keep in mind, especially as people are sort of looking for funds, is the amount of tax that could be generated just by the implementation of the tax. The other thing that's really notable is looking at your year-on-year growth. So you're looking at about 15% year-on-year rental unit growth. So again, it's quite substantial, and especially given the shutdown. But again, it really does fall in line with the trends that we're seeing in the market right now, where our people are leaving the cities and coming to communities such as yours and counties such as yours. Okay. So that gives you a really good overview of the analysis that we have so far. Are there any questions for me about that before we sort of move on any further? Nope. Okay. So really just to keep in mind that without proper enforcement, only a fraction of short-term rentals are ever going to get registered, pay their fair share of taxes. And so that's one of the reasons why it is so important to have like a program in place that allows you to continue to drive through and actually recover the revenue and the tax that's needed for Columbia County. The other thing really to keep in mind is that manual compliance and enforcement can be done, but it's just found to be ineffective and very expensive. So when towns, cities, and counties try and take it on themselves, you are only getting the 10% return. But in terms of the money that's left out there, we do find that it's just going to be a lot more onerous on the county to be able to do it themselves. Okay. So that's going to take us on to the Granicus host compliance solution and what we actually have to offer at the moment. So the slide probably looks a little bit different from the last time that you saw it, but the information is very similar. So overall, we actually have 5 sort of buckets of tools that we have to offer. So it is software as a service. So you would be learning from a club of local experts, and it's a password protected website. So there's no seat license. Everybody's able to use the data. It's modular based, so you can acquire what you need today, and then you can add any of the other components in the future. So the first bit I'm going to take you through is address identification. And this is what I was saying before in terms of being able to capture all of the data for the county. If you have a data share agreement, then share it. Usually it's via Excel spreadsheet with the different constituent towns and cities. And then basically looking at driving through. So they would contract their module separately. So again, with the address identification, it's the core offering. And so basically what we do is we pull down the data from the top 60 plus short-term rental platforms and then combine that with your assessor data. So that includes physical address, owner's address, and parcel ID. So all of the information is first matched by computer model, and then it's all human verified. All of the data and full length screenshots are updated on the platform every 3 days, and you can download the data at any time. So the thing about the address identification that I always like to point out is the fact that it's user friendly. So the one thing that really does set us apart from anybody else in the market is just the fact that, we've invested millions and millions of dollars in the service. And what that really means to you is that you don't have to spend a lot of time and energy actually running and mining the data. It is very user friendly. And the one thing that we want to do is streamline the process as much as possible. So again, when you come into the system, you go in, you'll see a map very similar to what you saw before. You click on the pin and you'll actually go into the specifics of that rental unit. So you're asking about like more than 30 days, less than 30 days. All of those different points would be captured in our address identification. So we actually capture over 150 data points. And so each one of the different teams, they can create different reports around it. And then you will be able to see, information about the match details. How do we come about creating the match? Understanding rental activity. So you can see there that there's the number of documented stays. You'll understand, a timeline of activity. How much is the property being rented out for? Information. So if there's on the town and city side, if they have information that they want to capture around occupancy rates, that sort of information will be captured as well. So it is really, really in depth in terms of the information that is necessary for the towns and cities. And then for you in the county, just looking at understanding who are these people so we can drive through to collecting the tax. Okay. So that gives you a good overview of the address identification. Are there any questions for me about that before we move on?
Oh, yeah, Sam, in the old host compliant module, you had like mobile registration, address identification, compliance monitoring, rental activity monitoring, and the hotline 24/7. Is that in your presentation? What those costs are, or?
Yeah, so it'll be the next slide. The one thing that I would say that'd be different is obviously if you're looking at contracting at the city level plus the town, is just looking at the synergies that are there and stripping out different components based on the data share agreement.
Okay.
Okie doke. Okay. So once we've actually identified all the addresses, the next bit is let's send out some letters, make sure that people know what's expected of them. So over the last 4 or 5 years, we've sent out tens of thousands of letters. We've done A/B testing to know what best practice is. And two of the things that we actually know to be really powerful in terms of driving compliance is one, looking at the white space on the page, but two, also including a snapshot of the actual listing of the program of the unit. So if somebody thinks that they're going to disregard the information, obviously for tax collection purposes, they want to know that they are actually responsible for remitting this tax. They turn over the second page, they'll see their actual listing, and we do find that that drives up compliance by 50% plus. So again, the one thing that's really great about the service is looking at the amount of time it takes to actually generate, a letter, send these letters out. One of our customers, he has about 1,000, so very similar to you guys. It's a city, but the city has about 1,000 short-term rentals, and it actually takes him an hour a week in order to compile his reports, to make sure that people are compliant with the regulations, and to make sure that he's confirmed with the team the letters that he wants to send. So again, super streamlined, doesn't take a lot of time. One of our other team members, he actually was demoing the product, and his 6-year-old nephew was close to him, and even the 6-year-old nephew was able to like click through the system to see how quickly it would go. So it is really, really streamlined and really easy to use. So that gives you a good overview of the compliance monitoring. Are there any questions for me about that? Nope. Okay. So the next bit is our mobile-enabled registration and tax collection support. So again, what we're doing is, Ron was just highlighting a second ago. Basically, what we do is we create a customized portal for online registration and tax collection support. And again, just streamlining the process, making it as easy as possible for people to pay their taxes through to you. And so what we're actually doing is we use the existing data that's there and basically streamline the process. So we send out the letters, let people know they need to pay the tax, and then we give them a link so that they know where they need to pay their tax. And then the follow on to that is they come online and they click in, says pay transient occupancy, and then they'll basically click through. It's pre-populated, so they confirm their name, their address, and then afterwards they would remit the relevant taxes. So in the service itself, basically, again, super streamlined, and basically what we're doing is just making it as easy as paying any other sort of online purchase. So if you're purchasing an Amazon parcel, Wayfair, anything like that, people are very used to using an online platform, and again, it is very streamlined. So just streamlining it as much as possible. Okay. So that gives you a good overview of the mobile-enabled registration and tax collection support. The last bit I'm going to take you through is the rental activity monitoring, because I think this is where, we were talking a moment ago about the difference between somebody who's more than 30 days, less than 30 days, people who say that they're renting out their property for more than 30 days or to a cousin, or they're staying there 24/7, and whether or not that's actually true. So the rental activity monitoring is basically answering the question of who's not paying their fair share of tax. How many nights have they actually rented it out? And so what we basically do is we look at the calendar and reviews to confirm the number of documented stays. And then basically on the other end, what we're doing is we've created a model. So basically with the computer model, we've been tracking the market for the last 5 or so years. And so we understand how much money should each one of the properties have generated when we look at things like occupancy for the season, the number of bedrooms, proximity to attraction and desirability. So once we actually run the model, we can see calendar and reviews, documented stays, and then on the other end, we can see this is how much money they probably have generated. And then once we have that base of people, again, what we do is we send out customized letters on your behalf, on your letterhead, and basically communicate we think there's been an underpayment of taxes, or that their activity information seems it doesn't seem to match up with what they're reporting in tax. And so each one of the actual short-term rental sites, they actually have all of the activity for each one of the rental units. So what we actually tell people to do is to download that information and upload it into the online platform. And that's the way that you would actually sense check and know whether or not they've remitted the correct amount of tax. Okay.
Can I ask a question about that? What happens
Yeah.
if they just, because we're not legally required, right, to update that information. So what happens if they just decide not to do that? They resist.
Well, they are, because it's tax, right? So they are legally obligated to provide you with tax information and to pay their taxes. So, people who do sit outside and who haven't actually remitted the correct amount of tax, we have had cases in the past where we have helped and aided different counties to take the people to court. So obviously, we would put together all of the documentation in a form that you guys would want and certify, and then we would certify the information to drive through to make sure that the collection is done. Does that answer your
Okay,
question?
thanks. Yeah, so then we would require them to upload their information from their STR rental site.
So
Or
it
you
would
just,
be, yeah, it would just be like an audit. Like you would be asking them
Mhm.
to take part in an audit. And in order for, just like if you were auditing somebody on another tax related issue, you would ask them to send in receipts. So this
Mhm.
would basically be tantamount to the receipts. I will say that the information, the activity that is on the platforms, it's actually geared towards tax and making sure people are paying the correct amount of tax. So it's just giving you that platform to actually request the information that they already have for tax, because it is their tax receipt on these platforms.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions about it? So again, the hope is that you don't have to drive to that point. And obviously, the main intention is for people compliant as quickly as possible. What we do tend to find is that it's a very small batch of people who want to get to a point that, they're still going to flout the rules. But, if you do have to drive to that point, we have been there before, and we have, enforced the regulations in court as well. Okay. So that gives you a good overview of the rental activity monitoring tax calculation support. I'm going to leave the dedicated hotline, because for this conversation, you guys really aren't looking at, enforcing regulations, but you obviously do know that we do have the service, and when it comes to speaking to the different towns and cities, then we can introduce them as well. So I'm going to stop there and just sort of get your perspective on the services you have heard and what your thoughts are about moving forward, and how the structure will work before we move into the price and the other components.
I think that, we're probably going to have to do some work in determining how, the logistics of this will work. And, I was going to see if maybe between Ron, Heidi, and maybe Art Basson could maybe work as a subcommittee on this issue to, in terms of the number of municipalities that are involved and what it would mean. Because obviously Hudson may or may not want to be involved. That's going to be up to them. But, so that we can work this out logistically so that you can give us have a good idea in terms of pricing
For
rather than
sure.
just speculating it.
I suppose the one question I would have is, because Hudson already has created their regulations and ordinance, are you guys in contact with them already? Because obviously the one thing that you would want for them is to have the best data, but not have to pay, to be able to use the same data share and to be able to utilize the same discounts that everybody else has. Those conversations that are kind of ongoing or that you guys are having at the moment?
We're in contact because a Hudson representative is on this committee as well.
Oh, hello.
Hi.
Like, easily share information and share data. I don't think we've totally gotten to that point yet, but it's the mechanism is there.
Yeah, so Hudson does use some services for compliance, and they're sort of like reviewing sort of the landscape. So I think there's sort of conversations in parallel. So I think when, as I was saying before, I think my recommendation would be that the county sort of proceed where it's not dependent on Hudson. And then sort of when we're at that time, we can sort of offer Hudson, hey, if you want to join, here are the terms. Are you in or out? And then I think there's at least a 50% chance or higher that Hudson would not participate.
Okay. And do you know, has Hudson already contracted with anybody? The last time I had conversations with them, they hadn't, but I don't know if those conversations have moved on so far. Because I could just see that you guys had just introduced your ordinance.
Well, Hudson just changed their ordinance, but it's been regulating short-term rentals for longer than just the most recent regulation. There's a company that they currently use for some services, but it's not as robust as what you're offering, and the city is looking for sort of an expanded set of compliance tools.
Yeah.
And it hasn't changed its compliance tools over the last couple of years. So I know they're sort of shopping around and haven't committed to a path.
Okay. All right. Sorry, I didn't actually get anybody's name. So what was your name?
My name is Michael Schmidis. So I serve on the county board representing a portion of Hudson, but I'm also an employee at the city of Hudson. So I'm privy to some of those conversations.
Okay, perfect. So what I'll do after this, Michael, is follow up with you directly, so that way we can have the conversation outside of this. Because what we might do is look at contracting now, and then obviously if there is the need or ability to, then we can amend the contract moving forward if there is sort of a synergy and the price reduction that if we have like a county plus town city agreement.
That sounds great. Thanks.
Perfect. Okay.
Keeler, treasurer. Couple questions. You said
we can't hear you.
All right.
TJ.
I'll move within 6 feet. Okay. Is that better?
Yeah.
A little better.
Okay. You said you could strip out the numbers for the city of Hudson. Can you do that? And I know you gave us an estimate of around 700. But can you do a couple things? Strip out the number of rental units out of the city of Hudson and compare the rest of the county. And in addition to that, give us the percentage of occupancy in the city of Hudson. And I'm sure that will also affect the average dollar amount of rental as well. So we can kind of project some possible revenue streams.
Okay. Yeah, I'll look at the occupancy. I'm not sure what we'll be able to provide at this time because obviously the system isn't fully up and running. But I will find out what we can provide. And generally, what we do is look at sort of a generic overview of the year for like the county versus the city, and give you an idea of what the tax remittance should be to the county versus the city of Hudson. So I can do that and strip them out and provide that kind of detail. Perfect.
And then Sam too, I don't know if it's too early to ask this, but each of these modules here, before we had a price, okay, that host compliance had on there. And you probably have to readjust it with the concept that the towns would able to piggyback on this contract.
Yeah.
And going forward for that, if you can adjust the price for that, the template of what the contract would look like, so we can look at that.
Absolutely.
With piggybacking the towns.
So just so I clarify what you want, you'd want the contract for the piggybacking agreement for the towns so that you'd look at the data share, or
Right.
would you want the contract for like a generic, like Granicus contract of what we would usually offer? Yeah, because I think the one thing with the data share agreement, it is really going to come down to us having a conversation about what it is that you actually want to share, and then us creating the regulations around that. So that would be the only sort of rate limiting step there. But in terms of giving you our standard contract, and this is what would be, what we would usually use, that I'd definitely be able to provide.
Yeah, it would come down to what module each town would use.
Yeah.
So, the county would use it, town would use it. But again, when we get into compliance monitoring, I think that's really up to the individual town to make sure that
Absolutely.
it's being complied with it for that. So I draft a contract with that concept in mind for that, Sam.
Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll send over our generic contract, so that gives you an idea. Generally, it's just going to be an amendment to that contract in terms of the data share components. As I said before, and you very much highlighted, it is going to be like compliance monitoring, looking at the rental activity, mobile enabled registration. Those bits are going to definitely be streamlined through to
Right.
the town,
Right.
but the address identification is where the data share will come into play. And yeah, we'd definitely be able to look at what that would look like in terms of the agreement that would be created.
All right, that'd be great.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, so the big question, are you guys interested in the price? It will change, obviously, because if there is a data share agreement, but just so that you know what it looks like.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm asking you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a big reveal.
Okay, so here we go. So this is basically the breakdown of the price. So the address identification, that's a huge savings for, if the towns and cities are not having to foot the bill themselves, or even if you guys did like some sort of split in revenue, this is how it would sort of break out for each one of the units. And then once we actually look at the full price, this is basically how it splits out. Again, when you're looking at your tax base and the amount of tax that would be driven through, what we generally ROI on these programs are about 3 to 4 times, what the project actually costs itself. And that's time and again. It's not sort of a one-off. We're seeing that across the board.
393. That jumps up to 11. 273. We got to factor out what the towns would be into it. 1503. 9,000.
And Ron, we're looking at the first 4 of these modules
so-
for the county.
yeah.
That's right, Mike.
Yeah.
So it's about 50,000. Is that what it is?
Yeah, about there. But again, in terms of looking at the ROI that's there, it would be relatively high. One, because you guys have a 5% TOT tax across New York. Looking at the amount that's being charged on average, we will split out. Hudson, but the numbers are still relatively high. Even if you're comparing Hudson to the rest of the county, in terms of the actual median nightly rental rate, and then just looking at your occupancy rate as well. So you would be looking at generating at least 2 to 3 times the cost of the program. So again, just over to you. I know that you were saying that you're looking at creating a subcommittee and just understanding what to do with the towns and cities. There has been some conversation about moving forward with the towns and cities before the county, how that would sort of look while you guys are getting the county up and running for you. Really just looking at next steps and where we go from here, and how I can help to sort of help drive the conversation, and as well make sure that you guys have everything that you need in order to, one, implement the tax, but as well help the different towns and cities as they're going through the ordinance creation process.
Okay, I had said this at a previous meeting, and you alluded to it earlier today. Basically, this is a train going down 2 different tracks. Is the compliance piece, and the other is the tax piece. And I think we can do, we can work on both of them simultaneously, and we don't need one to do the other.
Yeah.
So I think we can, at least start the tax process sooner than later. If we want to, we've got to get that moving through our local system now, probably in the next couple of months, so that it can be submitted to the state for approval. So I was going to ask Heidi to
draft some, whether it's a local law and or resolution that we would need, similar to a sales tax resolution, that's for us to be able to move forward as a board. And then the subcommittee is to work out the details if we choose to contract with your services, to work out the details of how we're going to do it, including the towns and villages and possibly the city.
Perfect. Well, that sounds like a good plan of how we move forward and what we should do. In terms of drafting the local law and just moving forward, I suppose the question is whether I guess you would have the use and access, but if looking at some of the different neighbors to Columbia County and some of the draft TOT tax regulations that are already in play, if that would be useful to you, what would be useful to you, I think is really the question I'm asking.
Yes, specifically Heidi, what would be useful?
Yeah,
for
I
you?
was just a little slow on unmuting, but but yeah, definitely those would be helpful as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
And is there anything else that you'd want to see from my end at this point and aid with expediting this as quickly as possible?
Ron, do you have any?
Yeah, just Samantha, send everything to my email. You got my email address.
Yes,
So
I
just
do.
forward everything to me, and I'll delegate it out to each individual that needs to see the stuff.
Okay.
Well, hey, Art, are you still on?
Sorry, say it again.
I was looking for Art Basson.
He's still there.
Yep, I'm still here.
Are you okay with working with a small group on this issue, Art?
Absolutely. I think that's a wonderful idea, Matt.
All right, thank you.
Perfect.
And Donal, you're welcome to, to be a part of it.
Okay, so in terms of next steps, what we'll do is I'll send through the presentation and the meeting summary. Generally, what we do is sort of schedule another meeting or a follow-up meeting. Did you guys have a time or date in mind as to when you would want to schedule a follow-up meeting?
Well, probably in January, we agreed to start meeting every month again. So I would say sometime, I'd have to look at a calendar that's.
So you said, sorry, mid-January. The last bit sort of sounded a bit muffled to me. I couldn't hear
Yeah,
the last
January. I'm just looking at my calendar.
Okay.
Of course, I got a call in the same time I went to look at my calendar. So, January 11th, okay with everyone? It's a Monday. Same time, 2 o'clock.
Sounds okay to me. Thank you.
Sounds good.
All right.
Okay.
Michael, is that good for you?
Yes, I'll be there. Thanks.
All right, thanks. So January 11th at 2 p.m. and
Perfect.
Kelly will send out the link to everyone.
Great. So I'll update my calendar as well, so that way we have that date in the diary. In the interim, I'll send through the presentation and meeting summary. And then the final bit is just looking at timelines and just understanding a bit more about your timelines. Obviously, as you're saying, you have to really get the tax in play first. But is there sort of an idea of what your timelines would be to move forward?
In terms of the tax, we would probably want to get something to the state legislature, probably no later than June, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And earlier would be better. If we could do it by April, that would be preferable.
Okay. All right. So you heard that. Our timeline would be April. That's our attorney, so I'll go by what she's saying.
And in terms of data for the towns in helping us track the population of short-term rental, better. And if we can start getting that information in January or February, our building inspectors can do their work much more effectively than if we don't have that information.
I guess the question is, how would we go about doing that contract? Because if you want that information now, obviously we can do it now. It's really just the rate limiting step of, do you want it with the constituent towns, or do you want it to be driven through from the county? How will we do that? And I think that that's the question: is the county still going to take the lead on that? And then we look at how we sort of work backwards.
That's part of what I'd like the committee to do is also develop the mechanism for charging the towns if that's the way we're going to go, and how we're going to collect that as revenue, and how we as a county pay for it up front, not having budgeted for it. We could probably do an offset, but we're going to have to figure that out, and that's what I want this subcommittee as part of their job to do.
Perfect. I will say, as I said before, we are getting to the end of the year. If you want it in January and February, you kind of are looking at this timeline into the beginning of January. And we are at the moment looking at, quite a few, who would I say, very, I'll say it like this. There's quite a lot of different towns and cities and counties that are struggling with this, where they don't have the budget at the moment, but they do want to move forward. And so our company is being very flexible because, at the end of the day, we do want to welcome you guys as customers, but it is, how do we do it now, and then look at payment along the way. So I think it's having a separate conversation once you guys have the committee together as to what it is that you want to do, what can we do for you in order to get you contracted now, and then look at payment that would be kind of deferred if it's not available at the moment.
Okay.
All right. So I assume, Matt, I'd follow up with you for that.
Yeah, I mean, Ron has been your point of contact. You can continue to contact Ron,
Okie doke.
and he knows how to get a hold of me.
Okay. I promise I don't bite. So either way, I'll send it through to Ron. But yeah, just so that you guys are having the conversation and I can look at the different options that are available to you guys. Okay. As I said before, what I'll do is send over the presentation, anything else that's necessary. Before we log off, are there any other questions or comments or anything else that you'd want to see from me?
No, I thank you, Samantha.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you, Samantha.
Great. Thank you guys so much for the time, and we'll speak soon.
Yep, take care.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
You too.
The same. I mean, if you do a bulk local law, are you going to include hotels and motels? And is the tax rate going to be the same?
Well, I believe hotels and motels are already paying.
Oh, okay.
So it would be just short-term rentals and Airbnbs would be because actually B&Bs are paying tax as well. It's the Airbnbs that aren't. So I think hotels are paying what is it? I'm not sure if it's 8%, but they're at least 4%. And she was throwing a number of 5% around, which was a new number to me.
Yeah, I thought it was 4%.
Yeah. Well, that's what the number we had sort of agreed that we would probably want to charge.
Yeah.
But so Grant, she's still on, I see.
See, I don't know. PJ and I are talking, Matt. Outside of City Hudson, some of the motels and hotels. I mean, the county's not collecting an occupancy tax, obviously, but I don't know if they must be charging a sales tax on their.
I think they're paying sales tax.
Yeah, sure. But not occupancy.
Yeah. I think they pay the 8% sales tax,
right,
which they probably pass on to the customer.
Right.
So.
And like you said, we'll come up with some sort of methodology, I guess, between the county and the towns.
Yep.
Some statistical data. We'll work on that, Art.
Yeah, it might be good to have a meeting before the January full committee meeting, Ron, just to talk about how to sort that out.
Okay, we can kick that around.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm PJ on that committee too.
Yeah, that's fine. And I mean, it's not exclusive. I just was throwing. I wanted a supervisor on there, and the more the merrier. And then Heidi, in terms of the local law for the tax, we can, we've got a lot of information to go by from past local laws and other taxes we've done.
Yep.
I'm sure we can probably steal from another county.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure there's plenty around right now. But it sounds like one of the issues is making sure that it's consistent across the board in terms of the application of it to hotels and motels and short-term rentals without double burdening the hotels and motels on top of that. So that's just an issue to sort of
Yeah.
consider and negotiate.
Yeah, they're angry enough at the short-term rentals already.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the point of this was to make it fair because the hotels and motels were paying, and these short-term rentals weren't paying anything.
Right, but then you have the short-term rentals saying that we're applying an occupancy tax to them, but not the hotels and motels, which, obviously we're then not also applying the sales tax to the short-term rentals. But I guess the question is, do you select one of them and apply it to both? Or are they treated differently? And if so, why?
Well, let's do some research there. Again, we're being sort of at the end of this process. A lot of counties have already dealt with it. Let's find out what they're doing.
Yep.
So, okay. Is there any other things we need to bring up? I know that Ann Cooper sent the document, all the rooms, for all of us to take a look at. So, if you want, maybe in January we can have her. If there's any questions about it, we can have her answer. She had to jump off the call because she had a medical appointment today. So.
And is Kelly going to circulate the presentation that Samantha made?
Hopefully, if she's me, Ron asked her to send it to him. So,
Okay.
So Ron sends it to Kelly. Kelly can send it to everyone.
right, I need it for the notes anyway.
Okay. All right. With that, if there's no other business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thanks. Donnell, second.
Yep.
I guess it's just the three of us anyways. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thanks.
Carried. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Yep.
You too.
Take care. Thanks. Hi.